Breast Support, Module 13. Breast support. Wait, didn't we already talk about this? No, this is not the same thing as breathing, but it is directly related. So in classical singing, we call breast support appoggio. Everybody say it with me. Appoggio. From the Italian verb appoggiare, meaning to lean on, to be in contact with, or to support. This is a learned breathing technique that involves slowing down the action of the diaphragm and exhalation for more efficiency in singing. It involves a controlling action by the abdominal and thoracic muscles and involves gaining better control over the breathing mechanism, which will enable the singer to pace the breath more efficiently. It's important to note that appoggio requires some additional coordination and training. It's also part of the natural breath process. It is considered the most efficient form of breath management within the international classical singing community. So this guy is doing the Garcia position. Not really, but he is getting ready to. So during normal speaking, the rib cage collapses upon exhalation. Remember, exhalation is when you blow out air. So of course, if you're taking air out of the body collapses. Think about the balloon. Appoggio attempts to avoid this collapse by retaining the posture of inhalation. Now think about that. The posture of inhalation. Learning to gain control over the muscles of the side abdominal wall offers true breath support. By making all conscious breathing efforts slow down by keeping the respiratory muscles engaged, helps the singer maintain a steady tone, stronger and longer. To achieve an elevated sternum posture, one can raise both arms above the head like our guy next door. The sternum naturally rises when the arms are in this position, suspending but not holding the breath. Then lower the arms while exhaling slowly without lowering the sternum or this little notch at the top of your chest. This is called the Garcia position, named after Manuel Garcia, one of the fathers of modern vocal pedagogy and science. So, hands in the air like you just don't care, right? Take a breath. Now exhale. Lower the arms. Bring the hands around. Now rest those hands, the back of the hands, in the small of the back, with the palms facing outward and placed one on top of the other on the sacrum or right above the butt bone. You can do this while vocalizing, which will encourage an opening of the chest wall with a raised sternum. This is good posture for singing and will also give you the stamina needed for appoggio. So let's review the anatomy of the singing muscles. Find each one of these in this picture. When you think about breathing for singing, you want to really have that pelvic floor engaged, also sometimes called the pelvic diaphragm. The perineals, the levator ani, and the coccygeus. Rectus abdominis, the transversus, the internal and external obliques of the rib cage, the diaphragm, which we've talked about a bunch, the psoas muscles, which go down the legs, the multifidus, the erector spinae, and to a lesser extent, the sternocleidomastoid. You can see muscles involved in breathing. The thing about the abs and the core muscles, and then the muscles involved in breathing, is you can't really manipulate one without manipulating them all because they are all connected by connective tissues. So when one is tense, they all tend to tense up. The important thing here is to try to relax those lower abdominal muscles and try to engage the diaphragm and the rib cage at the same time. This coordination takes many, many hours of practice. So when a poggio is applied correctly, the posture of breath retention or holding on to the breath can minimize subglottic pressure. What I mean by subglottic pressure means that right below the glottis or your vocal folds, that pressure becomes less. And this means there's less tension in the throat. When you inhale, pressure below the vocal folds is at its lowest level, and lung volume then is increased and it's at its highest. You cannot maintain tension in the throat when you are inhaling. Just try it. Breathe in. The throat will not tense up. Tension increases when you hold your breath. Now hold your breath. Feel the tension in the throat? In singing, breath support has both a passive component and an active action, which may vary with different technical approaches. When singers actively try to find something to lean on as support, they may use the diaphragm or abdominal muscles. Many new singers find this to be a lot of pressure and very tiring, honestly. However, as with all things that are new, this will subside, and eventually the seasoned singer stops noticing the pressure or contractions in the abs required for demanding singing such as classical technique. It's totally worth having great technique to learn this form of breath support. Here's some signs that your breath support isn't working. If your voice is tired or strained, you can't sing with vibrato, or on the other end of the spectrum, your vibrato is not under control. It may be too fast or way too slow. Your voice is breathy and inefficient. This is common in young boys and young girls. Not to worry, though. Things will change with age. Your body may feel locked and you can't move your shoulders or your back very freely. This means breath support is not in the right place. Keep working on this advanced concept in singing. You will get stronger and more adept at controlling and maintaining this lower rib action. It takes a long time to get the body to coordinate to a new breathing style. Acquiring the poggio breath technique will give you greater stability of tone, easier execution of large intervals, improved agility, clarity, and better breath management when singing very softly or very quietly. This is the end of the module breath support.
Hi, this is the module on breath support, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, didn't we already talk about this? Actually, no, we haven't talked about this. What we talked about was breathing. And the thing about breath support is it is related to breathing, but it's a little harder concept, which is why I've waited a little bit of time in your learning and in your learning music to talk about the subject. Now that you kind of have a grasp on how to learn the song and you're trying to practice the song, now you should have an idea as to some things that aren't working and maybe why, or maybe you don't know why. And if they aren't working and you don't know why, it's probably related to this subject. Breath support is kind of an anomaly in that a lot of people just really struggle with understanding the concept. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday when you won't know that this was yesterday, but we talked about it a little bit when we had the balloons and we blew them up and we were talking about the amount of air pressure in the lungs or in that balloon and how to prolong that or make that last longer. And that's directly related to breath support. And it is breath support, but I want to be very clear and very technical with you about how to make that happen and all the ways to make that happen. So it's kind of a complicated subject, and it takes singers a long time to grasp it and to make the muscles work in a way that's super efficient. And so if you get frustrated with this, please don't let that bother you, because I, for one, still work on my breath support. The body changes as you grow, as you age, all of those things. Maybe you lose some weight, maybe you gain some weight, whatever that could be a problem, or maybe you've had a surgery, or all kinds of things happen throughout our lives that make us have to re-look at the things that we do physically, and breath support is not different. And because of that, I'm always having to rethink breath support. Or sometimes I run across information that I go, oh wow, that is really a cool way to think about this concept. It is very sciencey and very medical in a lot of its terminology. So I'll try to keep it very simple. But the first word I want to introduce you to is the word appoggio. Now you have a slide in your PowerPoint presentation that defines this, but I'm going to tell you that it's from the Italian verb appoggiare, which means to lean on or to be in contact with or to lean against. And it is a way of talking about support. And it's a learned technique that involves slowing down that action of the diaphragm, which we talked about a little bit before. And this results in the increase of that breath cycle of exhalation and inhalation. And we want to slow down and increase that duration so that we can sing a long, efficient phrase. It involves controlling the action of the abdominal muscles and the thoracic cavity. It involves involving the abdominal wall, the transverse abdominis, the internal oblique, the external oblique, and the rectus abdominis, as well as the psoas muscle. And this involves gaining better control over the breathing mechanism. All those things have to do with breathing through the training of the muscles, and enables the singer to pace their breath more efficiently. Now, if you're going, you just said a lot of really big words, lady, and I don't know. Remember, you have this particular slide to go back and look at and read, and then you're going to also find a slide that has arrows drawn to some anatomy that will give you where these muscles are. It's not important that you can diagram or memorize the name of the muscles, but it is important that you understand that these muscles all work in concert together to help you have more efficient breath. It's very important to note that appoggio requires some additional coordination and training, which is why we're talking about it now, because it is part of the natural breath process, but we're doing it in a way that's not necessarily natural. We are going to try to prolong it. We're going to try to put off exhalation as long as we can. So it's considered internationally among many thousands of voice teachers around the world, consider this way of talking about breath management that it is the most efficient form. So we have the whole international classical singing community that supports this type of discussion about how to prolong your breath, or ergo exhalation, a phrase, a note, by slowing down that breath process. So during normal speaking, the rib cage collapses upon exhalation. So when I take a breath and I begin to talk, my rib cage, if I'm really thinking about it and concentrating and understanding the sensation of it, my rib cage begins to slowly contract. This allows air to pass through my folds and allows me to speak. But in singing, I want this to wait. I don't want it to come out immediately as soon as I begin to sing. If I collapse as soon as I begin to sing, then I'm vomiting air everywhere, and I then cannot control my phrases. I cannot control the amount of clarity that I need in my voice. So, appoggio attempts to avoid this collapsing by retraining the posture of exhalation to be like inhalation in the rib and in the sternum, which is right here. This all is connected to the rib bones via cartilage, and it forms in the rib cage. The technique slows down the rising of the diaphragm. Remember, rest, inhalation, exhalation. We want to slow this process down so that we have a steady tone that's stronger and longer in its duration as we sing. So to achieve that elevated sternum posture, which we talked about before, raise those hands over the arm, over the head, bring it down, and watch how this sternum naturally rises. If I'm here, which I often am when I'm talking, I want to be here when I sing. I want to open this up. This will help me be in what is called the Garcia position. Manuel Garcia is one of the fathers of modern vocal pedagogy and science, and he taught that the Garcia position, his position for opening up the chest, should be like this. You face your palms outward, and you place one on top of the other on the sacrum. So right back here in this part of the back, you want to really open this up. So here we go. Can't get much more open in my chest than this. I'm going to drop my arms and try to keep my chest open. This encourages an opening within the chest wall and a raised sternum. So now you can look at you'll see a slide that gives you the review of the anatomy in the thoracic cavity, and you can see each of those pictures in that slide. So when a pocho is applied correctly, the posture of breath retention can minimize subglottic pressure. Now remember, subglottal means below the glottis, below the vocal folds. And this glottis, at inspiration, that pressure is at its lowest level, and lung volume is at its highest. So the lowering of the diaphragm and widening of the lower rib causes the dimensions in the thoracic cavity to increase in both length, so in this way, and in width, in this way. And because it's incredibly elastic, the entire respiratory system stretches downwards and out, allowing for greater lung capacity. So once that stretch happens, we want to put that off as much as possible. We want to lean into that a little bit, push into that a bit, so that we can have this very active posture of inhalation going on, even though we're releasing air. That will give the singer much more stability. We also want to be sure that we're not shoving the diaphragm down to the floor, because we want the diaphragm to remain relaxed and be able to come up slowly. Anytime we start pushing against the diaphragm, it's more like going to the bathroom or having a baby. It becomes very tension-riddled here. And while we want some tension and some antagonistic tension, we don't want it to be something that stifles or gets us stuck in some way. So, once you begin to learn this, it's going to feel very foreign, very tight through here. But the deal is that it's just like wearing an earring or a ring for the first time. Eventually, it becomes part of you, and you don't notice it as much anymore as you did when you first learned it, and it will become second nature, and you will always begin to sing with that sensation and remain in that sensation without feeling overly distressed about it, because the muscle memory for it will increase. So, you won't see a lot of singers do this that are pop singers or country singers. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they don't need a lot of power or sustainability because they use a microphone. But it is also a way that they can get into trouble vocally, because if you support your sound and you support it correctly, the likelihood of having vocal nodes or a hemorrhage in the voice from over-singing and over-pressing is lessened, because you're putting the pressure here and not in the throat. Anytime you feel like you're singing from your throat, you need to stop and relax and rethink about the sensation of being here, not here. Now, if you're trying this for the very first time, you may feel as if you're not getting enough air and that you feel a little, the air feels stagnant. But if you really think about pushing those muscles upward as opposed to inward, you will have more air. You'll soon find that your air supply is indeed sufficient to complete your singing task. I will also say that this is a warning, and that is when you first start singing in this way, you can get lightheaded. We talked about that in a previous discussion as well. If you feel lightheaded, it's because you're using a lot more oxygen than you normally do, and it makes the brain blood supply full of oxygen. It makes the brain feel a little weird. So you'll want to, when you're practicing this for the first time, you'll want to have a chair close by in case you need to sit down. Again, if you begin to see stars or feel like there are stars, don't close your eyes. Just sit down. Take a few minutes to breathe as normally as you can to get through it. You may also be hyperventilating, so you want to be sure that you're not doing this quickly, but you're doing it slowly and methodically in much the same way as you would, say, a yoga breath. So there's a really great article for you to read, and it's on that next slide, so be sure that you put that link in and begin to read some more things on appoggio, or breath support. We're going to talk about it a little bit with my singers, and then we're going to do some demonstrations that I think will help you understand some things about appoggio and the neurological response that occurs. So we'll be in a discussion in just a moment. Hi, so today we're going to talk about our Module 6, which is breath support. And I know that you're probably going, well, wait a minute, didn't we talk about this? Well, not really. What we've talked about is breathing. Breathing and breath support are two very different things. However, they are related. Breathing is the way you take in air, the way that you may send out air. It's a natural response, right? But with breath support, it is about how you get the folds together and keep them together in a way that makes them very efficient so that the air is not too breathy, but also not too strident and too pressed. And it's a very fine balance between air and pressure within the folds. So one of the words that we use when we talk about breath pressure is appoggio. And it's from the Italian verb appoggiare, and it means to lean on, to be in contact with, or to support. And it's a learned breath support technique that involves slowing down the action of the diaphragm, resulting in the increasing duration of a breath cycle. So if you slow down the diaphragm from, remember, it goes down and then it comes back up slowly as you exhale. If you try to slow down that process of the diaphragm rising, then you have more air for a longer period of time when you're trying to get through a phrase. And in this way, this helps you be much more efficient. It involves controlling the action of the muscles of the thoracic cavity and here as well, and as well as the transverse abdominis, the internal oblique, the external oblique, and the rectus abdominis, and the psoas muscle. And it involves gaining better control over the breathing mechanism through training of the muscles and enables the singer to pace the breath more efficiently. And you want to pace that breath so that you know, I've got to get through 5 or 6 measures without a breath. And you know that you need to hang on to that diaphragm appoggio a little bit longer, a little bit better than, say, you would if you had a phrase that was just 1 measure long. So it's important to know that appoggio requires some additional coordination and training, and it takes a very long time to build the muscle memory for that. It's also part of the natural breath support because the diaphragm is going to come down on its own. And it's considered to be the most efficient form of breath management in the international classical singing community. Although I've heard a lot of pop singers and jazz singers talk about the same concept, but just not with the Italian word. So during normal speech, the rib cage collapses when you take a breath. So I take my breath, my rib cage comes out, but then as I begin to speak, my breath begins to leave the body and my muscles relax, and some of them contract in a way to help bring the rib cage in. The concept of appoggio attempts to avoid this collapse by retaining the posture of inhalation. Now, how does that work? Inhalation, right? Posture of inhalation. I want to think about that slowly. So when I inhale, my posture is up and out. I want to maintain that as I sing or speak, as opposed to the posture of exhalation, which is this. And singing or speaking in this posture really causes a lot of pressure on the larynx and on the vocal folds because I have to really work to have air pass But if I take a breath and I'm standing up straight, and remember we want to be in alignment, and I take that breath and I sing or speak in this posture of inhalation, my rib cage is expanded, my diaphragm is low, and I can sing or speak relatively easier because it's on the breath. The breath is leaving my body at a very controlled rate that I am in charge of. I say this a lot to singers. If the breath is in charge of you, that's a problem. You need to have control over the muscles and over your technique for breath so that you're in charge of whether or not you're going to run out of air. And like I said, this is something that you won't find in this short period of time that you gain complete mastery over. Because really and truly, I'm still trying to get mastery over it. Everybody I know, no matter how old, no matter how long they've sung, always has to work on breath support. Part of the reason is because your body changes about every decade. You have to find a new way to make the body work for you in singing, especially if you're going to be a lifetime singer. And I hope that's for you. I hope you're a lifetime singer. I hope you always get to sing. So, by making these conscious breathing efforts with the internal and external obliques and the transverse abdominis, and keeping the sternum up, having good posture, and not recoiling as you let the air go out, and then bouncing back up as you take air in, and having air deplete, back up, doing this recoil, right, is not an efficient way. It is also really difficult on the body and on the stamina for the person who needs to sing for a good while. So we want to be sure that we're physically strong, that we're grounded, and that we understand that our posture really, really matters. So that the sternum should naturally rise when you put your hands up over your head and when you bring that down. Remember, I think we did this in a previous module. Your hands down and the sternum is up, and you want to keep it in this posture. And then you want to take that breath and hold it for just a moment. And that's what we call suspension. You're going to suspend the air for just a moment, and then you're going to allow the arms to lower. But look, my sternum did not fall down just because I depleted my air. And this is a position that's old school classical singing called the Garcia position. So we want to try to get in that Garcia position. We put our hands up. Inhale. And now let go of your air. Try to keep your sternum up. That is the position for singing. So, you can also take your palms and put them here, right in the middle of the lower back, this way. And this also helps to keep the chest open and the sternum up. And you can practice singing your songs with it in this way, and it helps to keep you from gathering up tension by pulling the shoulders forward, which I see a lot in a lot of novice or new or young singers, where they begin to sing and they blow out air and they know they need to hang on to it, and the response is, oh my gosh, I'm running out of air. But you don't want to do that. You want to try to stay open, keep the chest area open, and allow yourself to be fully expanded as you sing. You'll see that there's a review for the anatomy for the thoracic cavity. Please review that. You will be given a quiz over some of those muscle names and over a lot of the information on that particular module. What am I trying to say? Screen. There we go. And that screen in your presentation for Module 6. So, when a poncho is applied correctly, the posture of breath retention can minimize subglottal pressure. And remember, subglottal means below the vocal folds. Supraglottal means above the vocal folds. So we want to minimize that pressure. You have a lot of pressure when you blow on a balloon, and it's really hard to get that air in the balloon. That that sense of neck tension you feel is subglottal pressure. And we also know that, when you see singers sing and they have a lot of veins popping out, that's about that subglottal pressure. We don't want that to be overblown or too much subglottal pressure. Remember, singing is this fine line and balance of pressure and airflow. So we want to be sure that we're trying to keep enough inspiration, enough air flowing so that this subglottal pressure does not build up too much. So when it's at its lowest level, excuse me, I'm having a hard time today. The lungs are at their highest pressure, and so they are trying to get rid of the air, and we can't have a lot of lung pressure in our body for very long either. That sends a message to the brain, oh my gosh, we're not breathing and we should breathe. So when you lower the diaphragm and you widen the lower ribs and you take your breath, and the thoracic cavity begins to increase in both length and width. And due to this elasticity that we have in our body and in our lungs, the entire respiratory system stretches downward and outward, allowing for greater capacity. So this is something you really, really, really want to work on and put your hands here and practice going and staying out if you can. So you also don't want to constantly and consciously push down really hard against your rectus and against your rectus abdominis and against your rectum. You don't want that sense of like, oh, you're going to lift a lot of weights, because that also puts a lot of pressure right here. So you want this fine line of feeling comfortable, but yet full of air. And remain that way as you sing. Singing is athletic in very many ways, and it requires some control over this part of the body. So you want to work on that. And we're going to go over some ways to work on that in just a moment. So this can be really tiring to the body as you learn to do this, but it gets better with time and you build up more stamina for it. And also the muscles go, oh, okay, we're breathing for singing, so now we're going to do this. I don't even think about it anymore. When I sing, all of my muscles stay out, and I don't have to think about it anymore. It's something I've trained my body to do. So this is a way that helps you amplify the voice and have louder sound, more sound in your singing, and it takes the place of a microphone. And that's what classical singing is. In classical singing, we sing without a microphone. Our goal is to sing over an entire orchestra or over a choir if we're the soloist. And that's really hard to do if you don't understand the concept of appoggio and breath support. So if you're a pop singer, this stamina that appoggio gives you is maybe not as important, but it can be really important in getting good vocal tone. Often singers who have a breathiness or have a raspiness in their voice, sometimes it's because there's just not enough support in the singing. So whether you're a classical singer, or whether that's your style, or whether you really like pop or jazz or country, you still need to understand that concept of having good abdominal control for stamina, but also so that the tone is clear and not with some residual noise in it. So very few singers have made careers out of having noise in their voices. Janis Joplin would be one of those people who had some kind of raspy noise in that, and other singers have been able to maintain a pretty decent career with some noise in the sound, but it's usually because they were really good at something else about singing, delivery, artistry. Maybe they were one of a kind in the way that they presented their art, but more often than not, people want to hear clean, clear singing. So when you first start trying to do this, you may feel as if you're not getting quite enough air, especially if you've used the support muscles by pushing them upward. So that may make things really hard, but if you do that, if you push the muscles inward, notice the tension that comes here. It's a lot of tension here. And we don't want that. We want this to be relatively free. So pushing down is much easier. So try pulling in and exhaling. Sorry. Try pulling in and exhaling. It's really hard. So that's why singing with this sort of pulling in, especially up here in the abdominal, that's up here in these muscles, and in the diaphragm, pulling that diaphragm up into the lung cavity, up into the chest cavity, makes it really hard. The throat wants to close. Part of it is because it thinks that you're choking. It's a neurological response. When I do this, my body goes into, we're choking, and we need to close the folds. We need to close them so nothing else can come down into the trachea or into our air pathway and cause us to die. It can also be that it thinks you are laughing. Sometimes when people laugh, you see a really good belly laugh. You get this sort of strange response in the folds, and that's them coming together to make that ha, 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 ha. So the body and this neurological response that happens, it's really hard to separate those, and it causes the throat to close. We don't want that. What we want is for the body to think that maybe we are going to have a little bit of something physical we're doing, like maybe picking something up, or maybe we're going to cough or sneeze. But we don't want it to think we're doing something life-saving, like choking. So when you take that breath and you push down a little bit and try to release air, it's much easier to do. And that is part of that apogeo and part of having that sense that you are still full of air. Now the diaphragm is going to rise on its own because it's going to do that. It has a mind of its own to a certain extent. But nature will take its course and it will begin to rise. And it's okay to go with that if you're getting towards the end of a phrase, and to trust that the diaphragm is not going to cause you to run out of air. Often people think they've run out of air, and actually they still have quite a bit of air in the lungs. So if you work on this apogeo or on this breath support technique, I promise this technique will give you greater stability of tone and easier execution of large intervals. So if you need to sing, having some breath support will help you with that. Improved agility, so being able to move the voice if there's a little vocal lick you want to do, something like that. You have some agility there. That can help you with your agility. And again, I said clearness of tone, and also, most importantly, breath management and being able to sing a phrase without feeling like you need to take air in the middle of a word or somewhere that it doesn't really make sense to take a breath, or it's not really where you wanted to breathe, but you did it anyway. And so not having control over your own breath is a really big deal in singing. So, and also if you want to sing quietly or softly, breath support is really important for that. So read the article that's at the end of this module. It's called voiceteacher.com, and I have a link in your module, and you can press that and read that, because that will also be on your quiz. So start practicing, get ready for learning this type of breath and breath support management in your next song, and we'll be talking a lot about that when you send me your pieces. So I'm here with Jane and Ashley, and these are two relatively seasoned singers. Jane's been singing a very long time and has her own voice studio, and also teaches adjunct here at UT. And Ashley, are you a junior or a senior this year? Oh my gosh, time flies. They grow up so fast. Ashley's a senior, and she's a music ed major, but does lots of performances and spent some time doing a musical this summer. And also sings in our choir and has had some roles in our opera ensemble. And Ashley is a pretty active singer. So we're going to talk about breath support, right? And let's talk about some struggles. What are the potential struggles that people have with breath
Oh, potential. Well, maybe a good way to put it is getting the rhythm of how to get the air in and how to get the air out. A lot of people will sing and then exhale everything at the end because they've taken too much in to begin with. I think that's a real common theme I see around, novice singers who don't have a whole lot of vocal technique, blowing out way too much air when you are singing. So you're not able to sustain through phrases, which also affects being able to sing softly. So it affects your ability to master dynamics as well. Those are two big ones.
And wouldn't you say that singers who blow out way too much air when they sing, a sign of that is breathiness in the tone? So what we mean is, instead of somebody being able to sing, ah, they sing, ah. That's way too much air in the sound, blowing out way too much air. Or it can be, ah, right? You hear that noise? Hear that extraneous noise? Well, that's something we don't want in the sound, in the singing. So all of those are ways that people use way too much air, and this chair is one. And not enough breast support in their sound. What about you, Ashley? What do you find? What was it like when you first started trying to learn?
Oh my goodness. The biggest struggle that I know that I have and I know a lot of my peers have is just knowing our bodies, knowing how your body was designed to work and how it's supposed to sing well. And so for now, almost 22 years, I've sung one way and having to retrain my body and go, no, Ashley, you can't sing this way. You have to use the proper muscles and have the proper air, and just retraining your body and knowing what that feels like is very difficult. So.
And if I remember correctly, before you came to UT, and you had been doing some singing in choirs or whatever, but also in church, right, with a microphone. Mm-hmm. And that's a very different way to sing.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we take the microphone away from you and you're basically vocally naked, right?
Yeah, right.
And you don't have the crutch of that, and you think you're loud, then once you begin to try to sing without a microphone, what is that like?
Oh, for a while I was in pain. I started to I would get tired easily. My throat would be sore all the time, and I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? I thought I sounded good, and I thought it was loud, and now I have to work really hard, and I started to work at the wrong things, and it just really started to do damage until I said, okay, I have to really be serious about how I'm going to figure out how to use breath support.
Right, and so often a common mistake singers can make is that when they begin to have some pain or they feel vocally tired, they don't share that with their teacher, right? They don't tell their teacher that. And you should tell your teacher everything. Tell your teacher everything. If you stop taking this, once you stop taking this class, if you decide that you want to take voice and you want to take it seriously, tell your teacher, I have pain, or I have, I feel my muscles are tired. Then that gives us an idea that there may be something going on, that maybe you're overanalyzing something, or maybe taking it to the extreme, right? That can be, and you want to be good, right? You want to do well. So often overachievers like Ashley can overachieve to such a degree that you begin to get some bad habits on the other end of the spectrum. So if you are experiencing pain, or you are experiencing soreness in the larynx or in the neck muscles, you need to send me an email and tell me that this is something that's happening to you. Don't hold that back, and I can help you figure out why or what's happening there. Or your instructor, whoever might be teaching this class, can tell you some pitfalls that might be happening to you in trying to overproduce. Because a poggio sounds like it should be a big deal, right? But is it that big of a deal? No, it's not. So it really is about an engagement. I like the word engage as opposed to a push or a pressure or just an engagement, right? How did you learn it, Jane? What were some ways, and what were some exercises that you did?
Oh, to learn a poggio? Oh, you're talking about a long time ago, and I'm not sure that I remember, but I can kind of share what I tell students.
Yeah.
If that's useful.
Sure.
I use the word engaging. One thing I also tell them is it isn't concrete, because I think a lot of people think it's like you push out muscles and you hold them tight and they don't move. So I use the term buoyancy, so that because you don't want muscles to all of a sudden be so strained and static.
Yes.
That's not going to
Help.
with
Flexibility is
right.
important, right?
Yeah. So
I mean,
use
imagine trying to do yoga, right?
right.
Holding your muscles rigid as you try to do it. Like that doesn't really work.
Like I talk about it maybe being like an inner tube when you fill, but that inner tube stays buoyant. I talked about taking a beach ball and pressing it under the water, and you're feeling a resistance, more like an isometric rather than shove. I honestly don't remember the exercises that I did early on, but I know that those are the things that I use now. So.
Do you have exercises you give your students for?
Yes. So I use those bands that they use. And
I have some in my up in my studio.
I was really lucky because I have a student who's a physical therapist who gave me a big roll of them. Now I can cut them to size for students.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
I give them these bands, and I have them create some resistance against the muscles so that when they breathe, they can feel that expansion. And then the idea is not to have it collapse. Not necessarily try and expand and push all the way out, but to try and keep it just in that same position to begin with, because it's the opposite of what people want to do. And even though we know the diaphragm descends back up into its place, and there is some movement inward, I tell them not to pull inward, which is what most of them do. So that just gives them a gauge. That's one thing that I do with them, with trying to find those muscles. I also have them lie down on the floor, and I tell them don't think about breathing, because I don't want them to think about it. I just want them to breathe the way they naturally do. And then we talk about the fact that they're feeling these muscles, and then I say now kind of breathe it into that natural feeling without trying to suck in a whole lot of breath. And then I have them breathe in and hold, and then kind of release. So those are a couple of things I do.
Cool. What about you?
So right when I really started getting into figuring out breath support, what that looked like, I used a belt because I didn't have access to like the stretch. But I had like a ton of belts at home. So I'm like, you know what? Let me try a belt, and you start to feel where like that belt should be, like the resistance that you're feeling against it. So that's a really cool one.
So let's talk about if you have a belt at home or you have some of those exercise bands, where you should. You don't want them high up above, around the bra line or up around the chest if you're a dude, like not up here, right? But it should be right around the belly button. And that if you're a guy, it should be right above the belly button. And if you're a girl, it should be right about your belly button. Since our waists are in different places, right? Or sometimes I like to say right around that pant line if you wear mid-rise pants. So that's kind of where you want it. You don't want it too high, but you also don't want it too low. Not in the pelvic area, and certainly not up in the high sternum area, but right in the middle, right around the belly button is a good. Okay, so go. Just a disclaimer.
Also, what I like to do is I like to just sit and like take a deep breath in, feel kind of like the inner tube that we talk about in voice lessons, and I like to just hiss and then sing gradually up into an open note. So, for example, it's like and doing that, it helps promote what it feels like to have air release, what it feels like to have a little bit of the folds abduct, and to have a really clear, healthy sound without pushing here or feeling any jaw tension here.
Good. All right. Folds abducting is really important. So let's do that exercise. Let's do it. So we're going to put our hands here, just kind of cover the whole area. And we're going to take a breath, right? You lead it, because this is your exercise. So you lead it. Tell us what to do.
Breathe in
Breathe in.
and hiss.
Okay. So I felt at the beginning when I was hissing, my diaphragm sort of stayed out a little bit. But then as I began to sing, it really started to pull in. So can we do it again?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And this time, I'm going to bet that may have happened to you in TV land. And that's a joke. And I'm really old, apparently, because you probably don't know what TV land is. But anyway, so for those of you out there taking this class, let's do it again. Do it with us. And we're going to take that breath, and we're going to begin to hiss. Find a pitch that you find is comfortable, not too low, not too high, but a comfortable pitch. And as you sing that pitch, try to maintain some pressure here in the hands. That's the key. So here we go. Ready? And. Here we go. So you should have felt like, yep, my diaphragm is staying out, my abdominal muscles are staying out and they're staying engaged. But you should have also felt that, yep, air's leaving the body, right? Like you're not stressed here and you're not, pushing too much. And that should have helped a great deal to think about keeping some resistance. Is about the strongest word I would use, some resistance in the hands. So another exercise that I like to think about doing for that is to lean over and drop the hands. This also helps, and you take a good breath, and you should feel some resistance in the thighs, right? Feel the abdominals push the body up towards the ceiling a little bit. Now do the same thing. Hiss and then sing. Yeah. So you should feel that. This may make your back a little bit sore. It makes my back a little bit sore when I've done it. I haven't done it in a while because I'm thinking about really expanding not just in the belly but also in the back muscles. I really want the entire thorax, the entire area, all of this to come out. I don't want to just belly breathe because that also doesn't help me with my balance. It doesn't help me with my posture. It's also pretty inefficient to do that. But I also want to be sure that my chest doesn't raise in response. It's going to raise a little bit because air goes from the bottom up, right? But I don't want this. That's a big no-no, right? So I want it to be a gradual filling. Think about filling a glass with water from a pitcher, right? So and that's about the response that I want. My body has filled up. I have felt some pressure even in my back, in my lower rib cage towards the back side of my spine. And I want to maintain that as I sing. So, anything else that you think we...
Do you ever use sustained hiss
What do you mean?
exercises? Where you get a good breath in,
Mhm.
and you hiss, and you time it to see how long you can sustain that hiss.
Yeah.
Because a lot of students want to throw a lot of air out. So the way that I suggest students do that is that they make the hiss super tiny, which, then they're not throwing air out. And then you're going to reach a point where your body is just like, your muscles aren't conditioned, right, to keep doing it. So often I will tell them, feel like you're getting taller through that. And when you feel like you're getting taller, or this is broadening, which it isn't, but when you do those things, you actually keep these muscles engaged. You're not thinking about it, but it's doing it.
Right.
I found that works pretty
Yeah,
well, too.
so imagery, what Jane's talking about, and not giving students like definite science kinds of instruction, but to have your imagination kick in can make a big difference in vocal technique. So the imagery is that I'm going to get taller and more open as I hiss, as opposed to allowing the body to shrink into that, right? It's like an accordion. As the accordion shrinks, the air comes out, right? So anytime you shrink the body, air is leaving your instrument, whether you realize it or not. But if I can stay up, tall, and flexible, then I can get some pretty good imagery there that helps me sustain staying out and not collapsing. So Jane brings up a really great point in timing, right? So if you have a clock in your room, or even like a iWatch or something where you can time yourself, your phone, doesn't matter, and you give yourself some time, and let's say you want to do 5 or 6 seconds at first, and you take that breath and begin to hiss. See how long you can go. If you go past the 6 seconds, fine. See how long you can go. And then once you know about what your normal is, see if you can't get past that. So try for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds. Once you feel like you've made some real progress with the hissing, then begin to try to sustain pitch. It's harder.
Yes.
It is a lot harder. You'll feel like you took steps backward. So let's try that.
Okay.
Let's try a hiss first, and then let's try a sustain. And I will pay attention to the seconds. So here we go. Ready? And go. Okay, well, they lasted longer than I did. I was about 20 seconds, and you guys were about 30. So good for you. I sucked. So
You didn't get tall enough.
I didn't get tall enough. That's been a problem my whole life. All right, so we're gonna do it again, and this time we're gonna sing. All right, and if my phone will stop giving me notifications, that would be awesome. I mean, my watch. All right, so here we go. Here we go. We're going to go in. Let's start at the top of the hour so I can be really precise. Or top of the clock. So here we go. Ready, set, go. I win.
Now we couldn't be able to translate that.
Okay, so you guys were like around 28 or whatever, and I was like 30, so it was only 38 seconds. But anyway. Anyway, so these are some things to do and some things to think about as you're learning your song. Happy singing, and good luck on the next piece that you're to learn. Okay, so we're going to start our discussion about apoggio, which means, again, to lean or push against, or to connect with. So, thoughts? It's hard, isn't it?
Yes, it's so difficult. Yeah.
Yeah? You still struggle with it?
I think, yeah. I think almost everybody still struggles with it, especially, I don't know, I mean, your voice changes.
Yeah.
And as your voice changes, you have to adjust for those things.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Absolutely. I find that athletes struggle with it. Runners really struggle with it. Sometimes instrument players, like horn players, woodwind players, really, really struggle with it. They just, because they're taught a little different breath than we get. And runners are taught, athletes generally breathe high, particularly and quickly.
So do dancers. So
do
with
dancers.
you
Yeah.
get this high breath, and they tend to, although I will say with dancers, they have a good sense of their body, and that gives them an advantage.
Yes.
When I'm working with them, that they understand.
Yeah. Us gymnasts tend to struggle with it a little bit. Because they're taught like dancers to hold the body up and tight So the action of like releasing those muscles and then pushing out against those muscles is very foreign. So if you're any of those things and you're struggling, we get it. It is part of the struggle. You ever watched a baby breathe?
Mhm.
You know how a baby will just, well, if you haven't paid any attention, just pay
It's all
attention.
natural.
If you have like a little cousin or something, they sort of, they sort of stand there and their bellies just sort of hang out, right? And they just go. And they do this thing naturally. Then somewhere along the line, they stop doing that. We stop doing that as people, as humans. We begin to try to, hold our bellies in a little bit. Not so much your age group, but my age group. If I came into a room with my belly hanging out, or if I'd had enough muffin top, my mother would have been, "What are you doing? Cover that up now. Put that away. Let's pack that up." No bellies. So I went through my teens and 20s, fully in my stomach, and wondering why I couldn't remember my name. Well, I wasn't getting any oxygen for one thing. But so when it came time to learn to breathe, and they were like, "No, you need to let go of that pelvic floor and let go of those. Just let that relax to the floor, and now stay there." I'm like, "But it makes me fat." All those really crazy things that we're taught, especially as girls. Boys, maybe, I don't know. I feel like girls are taught that a little more than boys. Did your mother ever say?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because she's not my age, she's younger than me, but she's a little closer to my age. So I feel like she's also part of that, still that Generation X. I'd say your parents are Generation X. I'm on the cusp of that. And so my parents were part of the greatest generation, and then my sisters were all part of, baby boomers. And that greatest generation of baby boomers and those late Generation X folks, or early Generation X folks, were still kind of living through that of that body image and keeping the body tight and, trying to look svelte all the time. So I think it makes it harder for girls to figure that out. Boys, if they're really athletic and they've done a lot of athletic things, they have a little harder time, I think, too, because they're used to breathing high.
They also, if they work out a lot, can have these pec muscles get really tense, and that inhibits
Yep.
them from being able to breathe. So there are lots of issues.
Yes, right. I've heard a lot of voice teachers tell boys, stop working and stop it now, which I find interesting. Yeah, because of the overgrowth of these muscles that then inhibit and push in on your ability to take a good big breath, right? This set needs to stay subtle, needs to stay supple and flexible. And maybe yoga is I'm a firm believer in yoga, and I wish I did it more, but it's super helpful, I think, in slowing down the breath and thinking about the breath and learning to isolate the muscles that have to do with breath. So if you're a singer and you want to do something and stay fit, I think yoga or a mixed martial art of some sort, or Pilates or Tai Chi, karate, things like that sort of slow things down. We're so excited where we do everything so fast, right? We just do everything really quickly. So let's talk more in depth. So how do you think about support? What are some things that you do?
For me personally, I think one, I started taking yoga classes this summer, and I have found it to be so beneficial because now it's really started to change how I feel about breathing. I don't feel as forced. Everything should feel natural. It shouldn't feel like you are overly exerting, and things shouldn't be tense. Because when you create tension in your breathing, it makes it 10 times harder to sing and to do it well.
Right. Are you taught, or is there a discussion about that in choir for you?
When we do the practice we do when we try and breathe better, we kind of lean on the wall like this, and we breathe as we're leaning over the wall, and then breathing heavy. So sort of wall push-ups help us train how to breathe more properly
Okay,
as we sing.
that's interesting. Okay, that's great.
You want to pick some of the things I tell my students and myself.
Yeah.
One thing I suggested to students, because you know it's very hard to get the idea of leaning against something that there's nothing there to lean, right? So a lot of times I'll say, imagine you have like a really wide cummerbund. That's all the way, that's elastic. And you need to feel the resistance, right? Push against that. That works pretty
A
well.
lot of old school teachers use belts,
Yeah.
right? Hernia belts, weightlifting belts. In fact, Pavarotti wore a belt throughout his career to remind him the importance of that appoggio.
Yeah, that one. And, you know, it's interesting, and not that the mechanism works the same way, but it's a good image for some students. You know, an accordion, when they're pulling out, right, they're pulling in the air. I tell them sometimes you need to feel like you're an accordion that pulls in the air, and then you know when they make the sound, they pull out a little bit more sometimes before they go in, to imagine they're pulling in the air and then expanding a little bit further. Sometimes that helps.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's a good visual.
They relate to it. I think you have to find something that you relate to that makes sense, that gets you doing the right thing. And that can be a lot of different things for
Yep.
different people.
Right. So sometimes I talk about a beach ball. And I feel like everybody has been in a swimming pool and played with this ball, right? And tried to push that ball against or underneath the water and felt that resistance, right? There's a big resistance there. And then to keep that ball under the water. So sometimes I talk to students about that experience. So as you take that breath, you take your beach ball and you go. And as you begin to sing, you push that beach ball down under the water and then try to hold it at about chest length. Let's say the water's up to here. And you try to hold that ball right here all the time as you sing. So let's do that, all right? So let's take an imaginary beach ball. We're gonna inhale here. We're gonna plunge that ball under the water. We're gonna get it right at about the sternum, bottom of the sternum, and breastbone right here. And then we're gonna sing, right? So here we go, breath. Feel that antagonism there? Feel how hard that is to kind of maintain in that way? So if you do that a lot, that's a really great exercise and visual to think about. Also, I like when I first start introducing appoggio to my students, one of the things I like to do is to have them lean over, separate their feet a little bit, lean over, kind of let their arms staple. So, yeah. And to feel their stomach at the top of their thighs. So I'm going to feel my thorax. Everything is coming at the top of my thighs. And I can already feel a little bit of the pressure. I can already feel a little bit of pressure because it's inhibiting my breath a bit. So I'm going to now take a deep breath. And what you should have seen is my body rise. Yeah? So I blow out and I take that breath. If I can't feel my body rise, then I'm not doing something right because I should have expanded here and pushed myself up off that. And now I'm going to do a second motion to that. I'm going to take the breath. I'm going to feel my body rise. And now I'm going to sing that same note. And I'm going to sing it, and I'm going to try to maintain that appoggio against my thighs so that I stay out and not let myself collapse back down to where I was at the beginning. So here, I'll demonstrate and we'll do it together. So I'm here. I'm going to take that breath. That can go a while, but the point is that I did not let go. I still haven't let go. Now I'm going to let go and watch my body. Appoggio. Yeah? So let's all try. Let's see what happens. And I'm a little lightheaded. Partly because I've laid down, right?
Don't get up too fast.
Also because of this stupid cold I have. I can't get enough oxygen. My nose is not enough. So, yeah. I won't pass out. Don't fall out of your chair. Here we go. Everybody down. And we're going to take a deep breath. Breathe in. Good. Are you still up? Now relax. Did you relax at the end, or had you already relaxed through the exhalation?
Like, I partially relaxed,
Yeah.
but then I fully.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? And the thing is you don't have to stay up like that as you sing. You can let yourself gradually exhale, especially if you know you've got time and you're going to breathe again, right? But it is harder then to recover, especially if that breath is going to be short and you don't have a lot of time. It's a lot harder to make the body go out every single time. So what you want to try to do is to maintain that ability to hold the muscles in a way that you stay out all the time and you just breathe, sing, breathe, sing, breathe, sing. Done singing, release the muscles. And you can get to where you do that, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. So why is this? Why? Not just to make the phrase longer, right, or to be able to hold a note for a long time, but it also makes pitch better. It makes the reliability of the voice better. Vibrato becomes more even. My tone is clearer. And so I want to demonstrate that for you. So I'm going to sing breathy at first, and then I'm going to engage my appoggio. And you should be able to hear the tone change immediately as soon as I engage those muscles, and I'll tell you why it does it in just a moment. So here we go. I'm going to purposely breathe in a breathy, or sing in a breathing. I can't get this sentence out. I'm going to purposely sing with a breathy tone. There we go. So. Now, I didn't do anything different. I didn't think about singing louder. I didn't think about singing more intensely. All I did was engage my muscles that I engaged for appoggio. And it changed my tone. Anybody want to guess why? Or have an idea why?
Does it give you more resonance?
It does change the resonance, sure. Yeah, absolutely it does. But here's how, right? So when I cough, or I'm choking, or I need to vomit, right? There are certain muscles that get involved in that, and there's a neurological response that our body is trying to keep us alive, right? I'm choking, so therefore I need to cough that thing up. My stomach muscles, in order to make the power of exhalation work for me, to cough that thing up or to vomit that thing up, kick into holy crap mode, right? So those muscles become immediately contracted. Just try putting your hands right here, and let's all take one little cough. Here we go. Ready? We're going to cough. Feel the response? Now, some of you may be coughers who go, this is your cough. It should be actually a kick out. You may have two muscles that do totally different things. This may kick in, the diaphragm may kick in. You may feel that. You may feel this lower abdominis kick out. The thing about abdominal muscles is they actually all can do very different things all at once. You don't realize that, but they're designed to do different things all at once. So when I cough, I first inhale, my diaphragm lowers, and yeah, I get this really two different responses. But what happens is, neurologically, that message not only is fired here, but fired here as well. And the firing of that neurological response is for my folds to go together. Boom, they close. They close. The glottis closes. And when the glottis closes and I begin to sing, I have what we call good adduction. The folds are together and they remain together throughout my singing. Why? Because neurologically, my body doesn't know anything different. It thinks it's in a really long cough or a really long, oh my God, I'm choking and I need to get this out, right? Well, so that's why it feels so odd at first. It's because we don't walk around in a coughing state or sneezing or sometimes a chuckle. People who belly laugh. Those kinds of things occur without, us thinking about it. It's totally subconscious. So we don't walk around in that, right? But for singing, you kind of have to walk around in that state. To walk around in a state where the muscles are engaged and in a slightly contracted way. And I say slightly, and I use the word engaged, because we're not looking to birth a baby, right? We're not looking to go to the bathroom. We are looking to have just enough engagement in those muscles that their tension is there, not here. Because often singers try to sing from here. They think if they sing from here, that's going to be a good thing for them. But it actually is not. And one of the ways that we know that it's not is that if you can't sing with a vibrato and you try to sing with vibrato but it won't come, that's a really good indication that you're singing from here, that your tension is here, that you're pressing for phonation. We don't want to press for phonation. We want the pressure to happen here and for the folds to come together in a natural, organic way, which is something that the body does naturally, like cough or vomit, but maybe not quite that intense, but certainly coughing to elicit the response we want. And we basically slow that down, keep the diaphragm low so we have a little bit of time to get through the phrase. So, one of the great ways to feel that is to feel the body and fill up with air and to feel it go towards the floor. And we struggle with that as busy people because we don't breathe properly when we speak. We don't breathe properly as we work. We tend to hold things in and tight, but that's not what we want. We don't want to be held in and tight. We want things to be relaxed and engaged in a lower way. And one of the ways to do that is to release the psoas muscles. And that's why I brought my handy dandy hula hoop. Who can hula hoop? Anybody? It's hard. Like, it's really hard. I can't hula hoop worth a crap. But I bought a smaller one because I have a really big one at home. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna already say I cannot do this. But look, I have to see, I cannot do it. But I have to move around. I have to move around. And what gets engaged is psoas muscles. They attach here, and they have long straps that attach then also to the front of my thigh bone. And they're attached to my ribs, and it's all connected. And the psoas muscles, they're for kicking out my leg. They're actually part of moving. I can't move my leg, believe it or not, without these muscles that are attached to my pelvis back here. And just come around. They're quite long and quite thin. When you're talking about a really large muscle like a diaphragm, they're pretty thin compared to, say, my diaphragm. So, but if I hula hoop, and we're all going to do this, so everybody get up. Not with the hula hoop, okay. Unless one of you can hula hoop. If I do that, and I want to, so the idea is to swing the pelvis around, right? Put your hands on your hips and swing the pelvis around. And let's all go in the same direction so that we don't run into each other. So we're going to go this way first. Here we go. Around. Now get up. I feel like I'm an aerobics teacher. Get up, everybody. Get up and do this because you're going to be surprised at when you take that breath how interesting the feeling is, the sensation is. Now, we're gonna all take a big, deep breath together, right? I'm gonna count to 3, we're gonna all take a breath. Now I want you to feel how that lower abdomen feels like it fills with air. It doesn't, right? It's going into our lungs, but all those muscles release and let go, and boom, we've had this sensation of a low breath. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Feel that? Feel the muscles all just relaxed, right? You cannot tighten them and do this. The psoas muscle will not allow that to happen. This also works the hip flexor, by the way, which everybody needs work in. Hip flexors are really important to keep you from falling down. Yeah. Now, once you have that breath, stop hula hooping and just stand. Feel how full of air your lungs are and how that diaphragm is low. Now hold that sensation. Just try to hold that sensation. Now let's exhale slowly. And hold on to that sensation as you exhale. So you've just done a portrait. Yeah? Only in a way that is not a portrait, right? It's a portrait. It's a little more relaxed in its sensation than maybe you expect or you think. Prolonging that maybe requires a little extra kick of the abdominals, but then the thing is you have plenty of residual air, and this allows you to stay flexible and supple. So you want to just take the time to take that breath. So a great exercise for that laying on the floor with a book on your belly and singing for a while and holding that belly out is also a good way to get in touch with that. Lying sitting in your chair and leaning down, but also, like I said, get that psoas muscle to release the rest of the abdominal muscles by doing this. Take that breath. Put your hand here and feel how it just lowers to the ground. And it's not something you have to really think about. It just happens. And it's amazing to feel those muscles just let go and have that air come in, right? So then once you're there, try to stay there. Try to prolong it. I want to introduce one more exercise for you, but we're going to stop the camera for a minute and then we're going to come back to it in just a second.